Welcome to the Ditch the Struggle podcast. I'm your host, Alana Rosso. I'm a graphic designer turned career and success coach who knew I could do better, but kept falling short of where I wanted to go. But after years of exploring personal and career development, business, money mindset, and energy work, I'm here to tell you that yes, you can move from stuck and defeated to empowered and confident. Ready to dive in? Awesome. Together, let's ditch the struggle. Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I want to talk about two different things that have been coming up over and over again with coaching clients. And I'm pretty sure you can relate to both of these things. I certainly can, and they have been probably the two biggest factors that have contributed to my burnout that's happened throughout my career. Different times I've gone through different phases. So those two things are overload and fragmentation. So first I want to talk about overload because honestly, this is, I'm going to say almost number one that comes up with some of my corporate clients. So especially ones that are not necessarily in the creative career world, although it certainly comes up there, but ones that are kind of in the more traditional corporate world. And I'm going to share one story that I think is fascinating and kind of blew my mind. And I hear a lot of stories. So if my mind was blown, then y'all need to sit down for this one. So the whole thing about overload, no surprise that we are being worked like crazy. Humans are treated like machines in the corporate world. There is just never an end to the amount of output we are expected to create and to be responsible for. And I've talked about this in other episodes, and I go into sometimes what we call hammer time, where it's just I like drop the hammer and like I go for it. And, you know, let me be clear, I'm very grateful for a lot of my corporate jobs, but the system is a little bit effed up right now. And the amount of work that people are required to execute is insane. And I keep seeing, you know, all these posts on LinkedIn. I know like Adam Grant style ones, you know what I'm talking about, where it's like, you can't overload your employees because, you know, you're not going to get the best results and they're going to be unproductive and they're going to go on leave and then it's going to cost you all this money. Blah, blah, blah. So Adam, we know you're right. And there's the people in corporate, like most of them aren't listening. And so let's go back to how I'm hearing this. So many people I talk to, they just cannot keep up with their workload. They are overloaded. They just can't do it. So they come into the coaching session. And again, these are the more corporate clients. I've done corporate coaching through a company called Growth Space where, you know, I can be working with someone from like banking, finance, real estate, all these things. And so I'm hearing a very wide gamut of stories. And they come and they're like, okay, so I have all this work. I get really overwhelmed. I need you to tell me how to basically systematically make it through my workload. So that's usually the first thing they're trying to figure out, like strategy for getting through it, managing it. But what's really interesting is they often believe there's something wrong with them because they can't keep up, that they're not able to do all the tasks on the to-do list. Meanwhile, the to-do list is insane. It's like a job description. You know, when you see a job description on LinkedIn or a job posting and they're like, they want you to do 723 things and be expert at it. And you're like, that's not possible. They're like, but we want 723 things. And you're like, but that's not really possible. I can do like 50, but we want 723 things. Kind of the same thing. Now, that's usually a wish list, but there is this expectation that we have to keep up with all of these things and more on our plate. And again, the LinkedIn posts will tell us, you know, set boundaries, push back. It's not always possible. I mean, when I was pushing back in my cosmetics job as a creative manager, I mean, that was a toxic job, which is episodes 59, 60, and 61. I go into a deep dive, but the work was coming in so heavy and I just knew I wasn't going to be able to keep up. And there's just that feeling of failure that overwhelms your body and your mind, and I think your spirit too. You just feel like you are failing, that you are not doing things right, that you just can't keep up and everyone else can keep up. And this is what really comes up in the coaching sessions. Like, why can't I keep up with everything? There's like that kind of phase. Like, why is this happening? Why is it so hard for me to do this? And then they do. But on the flip side, they're also, again, the paradox, which I always seem to talk about a paradox. On the flip side, there are recognizing that it's kind of insane. Like, the company could be asking them to do a job that's like 3 people could do, that they need 3 people to do. And I just see so many cutbacks in companies where they're like, okay, we're going to take these 2 roles and consolidate it to 1, but the one person is still doing it, right? So it's really painful. And I will be honest, when I'm coaching in this situation, there's a part of me that thinks, well, I can literally do nothing because the situation, the external situation is so dire, so difficult. Now, inevitably there are things we can do, and we can kind of look at the perspective and how we manage stress. And there's a lot you can do, but I am just someone, I have lived through a lot of different jobs, and a lot of the time you have to remove yourself from the situation. Now, I know this isn't always possible. You have to stay in a job to make a paycheck. So I'm extremely sympathetic to that. And I have been in that position where I had to stick things out because I just needed to have the income coming in, right? But I really do think we have to challenge ourselves as to what we're going to tolerate. And at what point do we say we can't do this anymore? And you want to say it before you get totally burnt out, because that's the thing about burnout, is that it creeps up on you. And you think you're fine, you think you're fine, you think you're fine, and then you're not. And it was actually my dog's veterinarian, one of her veterinarians, that said it best when my dog got really sick. She's like, you're fine until you're not. You're fine until you're not, right? And this can happen with the overload thing. So let me just share this particular story because I thought it was so interesting, and especially the part about us tolerating things and how long we tolerate things that are just freaking insane. So I was working with someone who used to be a store manager for a retail chain in Canada, and he was working in the Toronto area. We'll just call him Mike. Mike is working in the Toronto area. He is a store manager, but he got promoted. He gets promoted to, I think the title was something like a director of operations. So instead of working on the floor in the store, and it was a very large physical store and also like a large chain, I think, so he was in charge of the one store, but it was very large. Then he gets promoted to a director of operations where he was going to be kind of in corporate office, so out of the physical store, and I think responsible for maybe like 5 or 6 different locations. Really demanding job, and he wasn't sure if he wanted it. Now, when I saw him, I started to see him, he had just gotten promoted, was in there a couple months, and some of the initial conversation was like, how do I manage these people? Like, it was a lot of people management stuff because some of the stores just didn't seem to care. And this was a guy who was so conscientious, would just like worked really hard, very high integrity, and just couldn't understand why some people didn't want to pull their weight. And they made a lot of excuses. So we're having conversations about managing the team and getting them motivated, although there is that thing, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? Super frustrating. But he was struggling in the role, this corporate role. And truth be told, wasn't really enjoying it. And as soon as we started talking, I think he was way more uncomfortable with the role than he was even letting on. And he had said at one point, maybe 2 or 3 sessions in, maybe I'll go back to my old position. And so I intuitively felt that was going to happen. I wasn't sure, obviously, who knows, but I kind of wrote out the whole thing with him to see what would happen. And sure enough, one day we get on a call or a Zoom, and he's decided to go back to his store manager position. But was the wild part of this whole thing is, he was so stressed, not sleeping, just kind of miserable. And whenever we chatted, he felt so deflated. Like, that was the vibe I got. I was like, Mike, you just seem so deflated, if I can offer that observation. Like, downtrodden, not happy, was really frustrated because he was having less time with his family, which was really important to him. And then we're talking through, all the things that he's experiencing in this job. And he's like, yeah, I can't believe I'm doing this all for like 120 extra bucks a week. And I was like, sorry? Yeah, I think it was either 120 or 160. I'm not sure. Either one, the number's not great. He's like, yeah, this promotion is really only making me about $120 net a week. And I was shocked because the responsibility with this director of operations job versus the store manager job, which was a huge amount of work in itself, but this was just exponentially crazy and also required a lot of traveling between different stores. But that's not the really crazy part. So it's let's say $120 extra a week. And actually, I don't know if he was saying per paycheck. I can't remember because it's about a year ago I was chatting with him. If it was 120 a week or 120 a paycheck, let's just say it's 120 a week. But that's not the crazy part. Like, that's crazy. But the crazy part is that he had to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 5 days, and half-day Saturdays. I mean, I almost fell off my chair because I was like, okay, you're putting in your 5 days, and then they had to go in, I believe it was from 9 to 1 on Saturdays. That literally ruins your whole life. Like, we only have 2 days off in this stupid, stupid system of just 5 days on, 2 days off. Like, if we had a 4-day work week, we'd have a different world, but we'd all be happy. And that might not work out for some other people that don't want us all to be happy. They want us to be kind of just on this hamster wheel. So I had to clarify. I was like, so you mean to tell me that you've taken this promotion that you weren't really sure you wanted? You're completely overloaded. You're working 5 days a week plus a half-day Saturday, which means you can't go away for the weekend. You can't go to the cottage up for the weekend. You can't do stuff with your family and do a whole day trip or something like that. And you're making this like $120 a week for this. And he's like, yeah, this is effing crazy. I can't really say, yeah, this is crazy, but I honestly have never heard this. So again, I talk to so many people doing corporate jobs. Yeah, you might work extra on the weekend as part of like, I want to get ahead of things, or I'm a, psycho high achiever like I have been. But where it was mandatory that you actually worked 5.5 days, and let's be honest, that ends up basically being a 6-day work week because you might leave late on the Saturday. I really couldn't believe it. And this is like a really well-known retail chain in Canada, and we're specifically talking about the Toronto area, and I was horrified to hear this. I just couldn't believe it. I thought it was awful. I think it's inhumane. Truly, I think this is an inhumane way to create a role. No role should do that. Again, if you want to work extra time, that can be a voluntary thing. So that was shocking. Well, then it kind of made sense that Mike ended up going back to his old role. Now, our sessions kind of finished just as he was returning back, so I have no idea how that worked out for him. But I do know that he felt very at peace with that decision, and it was the right decision for him. And I could just kind of see the relief on him because he was so overloaded in the new position. Not to say he didn't work really hard and wasn't slightly overloaded in the old position, but it really did take a lot of guts to also go. It wasn't like a demotion or going down, but it was like, in a way, others could see it that way. And he had this kind of big fancy title, and then he's going down to store manager from director. And, it took courage. And I think this is the thing. It takes a lot of courage right now to walk away from a position just because you're overloaded and it's not working for you. It's like we want to hang on to things so much. Like we hang on way too long because, well, we think others won't see us as successful. And I also think a lot of it is the internal pressure that we put on ourselves. And, objectively, this situation was insane. There was no way that this guy was ever going to feel like he could get ahead. And that was the feeling. He's like, I just can't get on top of anything. And so that feeling of not being able to get ahead, not being able to get on top of things, and like if you go away for a vacation that you're just completely slammed, it's really not making any sense. And we're all tolerating it to a certain extent. I just went through 3 weeks of like a lot of work. It was just the way timing worked out that one of my freelance clients came with a project. I do about 3 projects for them a year. And the timing was totally different than usual. And so they came at me early with a project. And so it was just overlapping with another thing. And listen, I was overloaded. But here's the thing, I did know it was temporary. And there really wasn't much I could have done about it. But it was temporary. It was like 3 weeks of kind of yuck. But it's when you're overloaded constantly that the chronic stress sets in, the burnout sets in, and all these things. And it's, so what's the answer? Like, it's insane. And then what's the answer? We do have to choose to walk away from a lot of these jobs and not engage in them. And again, I'm not saying quit your job and we can't do that, but what we're choosing isn't working for a lot of us. What we're choosing is not working for a lot of us. And I think we have to get honest about that. And I have more stories to share on this subject. And I have such a good story in the works, kind of like a bait and switch job. It's someone very close to me who took a job that turned out to be something totally different. But I can't tell the story yet because they are still in it. And generally, I wait for people to be out of that situation before I tell the story. So that one's coming. But anyways, I've been spending some time on LinkedIn. I'm not on there as often as some I have been in the past. And I tend to, after 10 minutes, I'm kind of done with LinkedIn. But it is, as I always say, very successful or a very helpful tool. But I saw a job posting and it's like, man, you got to appreciate the transparency with this one. And this relates to the overload. It says right in the job listing, you enjoy working longer hours in a fast-paced, high-volume environment. You enjoy working longer hours. So this is the person they want. And I get that a lot of people are going to apply to this because they need a job. There is a lot of like crazy job loss right now in Canada. There's like a lot of people struggling. But I do see this kind of thing written in a job listing, job posting, and it does make me feel nauseous. And it's partly a couple things. I was that crazy workaholic. And so this journey of me kind of moving away from struggle is chilling out, calming down, and doing less or being a little bit more strategic. So this kind of triggers me in a way because it reminds me of that expectation I had on myself, that in your 20s and 30s when you just have to go, go, go and never say no. So there's that part of it. Then there's the part of it that I get triggered and mad for everyone else. And then like not just the people I talk to as clients, but just everyone else who don't want to do this. They don't actually want to work longer hours. They don't want to be away from their friends and family and their kids and their pets. They don't actually really want a crazy, fast-paced, high-volume environment. Some people do, and like they thrive on being busy and like the fast pace. And again, I certainly do to a certain extent. So I'm not telling everyone to slow down and just become a sloth, okay? And that's not what I'm saying. But I feel like people are being pressured into believing that this is what they want when it's not what they want. They want a busy, maybe, but not like crazy frantic is what I'm hearing. People are wanting to slow down right now. And the work in the digital world, especially like in the tech digital world, it just never ends. There's never like that light at the end of the tunnel. And that's a feeling that I'm hearing from a lot of people too. And that one's a difficult thing for me. I can remember so much in my 20s and my teens, that feeling of not seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, mainly going through like chaos in my house. So that emotion, that feeling of like things are never going to get better, things are never going to be resolved, things are never going to come to an end. There's just like no end in sight. That's a tough one. And when you have that feeling, how do you actually decompress? How do you relax? How do you actually recover? And so many of us are so overloaded that there is no chance of recovery. This is why so many people are physically sick, mentally sick, just unwell and feeling like garbage. They're so overloaded. So I don't know how many solutions I can provide to this. It's just that the realization that you might not want to be living like this, but we have been programmed and conditioned to believe that we should be in an overloaded state all the time. And I do not think this is true. And I think it's important to look at how you actually like to work. So for me, I actually like short bursts. I do like some intensity and some like, okay, go, go, go. But I need long stretches of recovery time afterwards. And I think that's pretty true for anyone who's a pretty, solid introvert is what I am. and an empath as well. Like, so that tends to work really well. If I have like an intense period and I get to like really go crazy on something, but I know I have recovery time, it's when I don't have recovery time that I'm just like, it's a hot mess. And so recognizing the way that you work and like the amount that you would like to work, it's just like the amount of sleep you need. I have one friend and she needs 10 hours of sleep a night. She is a highly sensitive person. She's also a creative. And she wishes, I hear her say it, I wish I only needed like 6 or 7 hours a night. I really wish I was that person. And I can be that person. I can sometimes go quite a few days on not a huge amount of sleep and I'm actually functioning. It's not a great thing. I think it catches up with me. But I think it's my cortisol just kind of keeping me going. But when I hear her saying, I wish I was that person, it's like, well, I understand why you're saying that. However, you seem to be this person that needs 10 hours of sleep for whatever reason. And I remember working like a round table of graphic designers and one at a Design Thinkers event. And I was kind of leading this round table. And there was such a sweet girl who was new to her career. She was 1 or 2 years in. So she maybe was like 24 years old. And I could figure out in 2 seconds that she was a highly sensitive person. She was an empath. She was just a very sensitive soul. And she was working an agency job, and it just was such a misalignment. And somehow it came up that she's like, yeah, I need 10 hours sleep a night. And I was like, yeah, I have a friend who needs 10 hours sleep a night. And she's like, really? Like she just felt so ashamed of this fact. And like that's the way she had to operate. And that's what her body needed. And she needed way more recovery time. And I'm sitting there going, listen, you're in my head, I'm like, you're such a sensitive person. You're processing things so differently. You see the world differently. You're feeling things differently. You're going to need more time to recover. So I think it's really important that we recognize how each of us operates. And the overload thing, it is like, it's just a more society that we're working in. And we've got the Teams, we've got the Slack, we've got the emails, we've got the text, like we're just bombarded. And so I personally have been avoiding any kind of job that is like that. This is partly why I prefer to be self-employed and freelance, because I can have boundaries around that and not have to engage in so much of that. You know, I had a great freelance job where one organization, I was in their Slack channel, but there was no expectation that I was a regular communicator on it because I was not really a full-time employee. So that was just worked for me. Now, with being an independent contractor and freelancing, there comes other things. You know, you don't have cash flow the same way. You don't have some of the benefits, all the stuff. So there's things to think about. But the point is to think about how you work best. And then I really want you to think about this whole concept of overloading and be honest with yourself of how overloaded you are. And lately, I have had some interesting conversations with people that are maybe like mid-30s. So they've been working a solid decade. And they're feeling that, oh my God, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Like this is just more. And if I keep getting promoted and just go up the corporate ladder, it's just going to be more. And they're kind of looking into the future and they're like, not so sure I want this anymore. You know, and it's really kind of cool to see the changes in perspective and then people thinking, you know what, maybe I need to do things differently and maybe this isn't working for me and maybe the dream I had has got to shift and change. So that's a huge piece that's been coming up in terms of clients and what they're kind of wanting to talk about and how they're feeling. It's the overload, which of course leads to the burnout. I don't know if I've talked and coached anybody who isn't feeling some sense of burnout. And then the other is fragmentation. And this is, again, a huge part of the digital world and a product of that and how we are now split in terms of focus and doing a million different things at once. And the frustration that I'm hearing, though, from people is that they're in a job and they can't focus on anything because they're being pulled in a million directions. 50,000 people want them at any given moment. And they have, again, all the channels, the Teams, the Slack, all the things going. They can't focus. And then we have social media where we're getting pulled into like, oh, buy this. And then, oh, cute dog, cute otter, all that. We're just split in so many different ways. And how it feels to me when I hear someone talking about how they're pulled in all these directions is just like their body, mind, spirit is shattered like glass. So it's all these different pieces that are shooting off in different directions, and they don't know how to put themselves back together again. And they don't feel like they can ever be put back together because it's like the shards of glass that have split off are just like a million miles away. It's like, how do we come back together? How do we feel whole? And it is truly almost impossible to feel whole if you're in this position where you are constantly only able to work 7 minutes here, 8 minutes on this, and then you have an email running to a meeting, blah, blah, blah. And so you're like a headless chicken and you're just, you're running around like a crazy person. Again, this is something that connects to my childhood because my dad's nickname for me was Mad Dog because I would run around and do 500 things and just like, listen, I was distracting myself because I just thought the harder I worked, the like more I could control my life for it, right? But I'm seeing this so much in corporate, and I'm seeing with people really close to me, they're just like, I can't go into work and not be able to focus anymore. Like it's destroying me to not be able to work on something. And I totally get it. It's one thing to be like, just have a lot of work, but when you can't even sink into the work and dig into it, that's like a whole other level of dissatisfaction that comes up. Last week I had one day and it was such a good day because for the whole day, I just had kind of one project to work on. I didn't have any appointments. That day I didn't have a coaching client. I just was not distracted. Like I got to really attack and sink into the project I needed to do. And so I got my good 7-8 hours into it and got my exercise in and just like got to spend time walking my dog. Well, she doesn't walk very far, but out with my dog. And I was like, wow, that was a good day. And it was a good day for such a simple reason. I got to focus. I think we naturally actually do want to focus on things, and it's completely unnatural to be pulled in 7,000 directions. So again, what's the solution to this? Well, when you're in a job or even when you're interviewing for a job, it's like you have to be aware of like what the culture is in terms of like how the expectations are going to be around operating and moving around different projects and moving from task to task. And this is a huge reason why I have never enjoyed working in like digital agencies, because the culture there is very much like, we're just going to, you're going to go from Zoom to Slack to Teams to this, and you have to jump through hoops for the client because you have to be at their beck and call, and you are just all over the map. And I think so many of us are tired of being all over the map. We are just exhausted. We want to come to center. We want to be focused. This is why people are doing meditation and their calm apps. I personally love the Insight Timer app. Weirdest name. I don't know why it's called Insight Timer. Well, I guess I can guess, but it's, anyway, it's a great app. Bad name, great app. But yeah, this fragmentation piece, I think, is killing us. The overload, the fragmentation, those two things, it's a recipe for disaster. And we need to start rejecting the scenarios where we're in it and walk away from those experiences. Again, strategically, we're not just all like going to quit tomorrow and stop doing these things or give up on clients. But, the difficult client who is texting you and emailing you all the time and like not letting you get your job done, not letting you focus, like that's a kind of fragmentation as well. And so do you really want to work with people like that? Like I so appreciate when I have a client, I'm like, okay, I'm going to, get back to you on the Wednesday. Give me some time to sit with this and figure it out. The ones who say, cool, great, those are my kind of clients. Those are my people because they are helping me avoid fragmentation. They're helping me focus and actually do the best job I can. That's what I love. Like, just give me the time and the space. And that's what's triggering people with this fragmentation. It's like, just give me the time and give me the space to do what I can do because I can do it. But you're not letting me do that because of this, all these external circumstances and all these voices and all these people. And we just have to come to center. We have to come to center somehow. This is really not an episode about answers, but I wanted to share kind of what's coming up with clients, what I've been hearing just with friends, what I've been experiencing, what I'm seeing as a trend. And again, it doesn't seem to matter how many people post these great things on LinkedIn about, giving people time and space to do what they want and not giving them the huge workload. Certain companies won't care. Certain company cultures are not invested in this, in true wellness. And so we have to leave those companies. This is what I think. We can't participate. We're in this. We're consenting to this bullshit when we are working with these kind of companies that just want to drive us to the ground. Again, this retail chain that was insisting their director of operations worked basically a 6-day work week. That is such insanity. Oh my gosh, I still can't believe it to this day. I haven't heard that from any other client ever or any other corporation. And I've worked so many different places and I know a lot about quite a few different, Canadian companies, especially the big ones. This one blew my mind because it's a really big company. I just even when I worked at Rogers, which is definitely one of I think the worst companies to work for. I've worked for them in 3 different roles and 3 different companies under the Rogers umbrella. I haven't even heard this insanity coming from Rogers. So it's bad when the work policy is worse than a Rogers work policy or some of the... Anyway, so I'm sharing these stories really so that you know that you're not alone. That these things are going through people's heads. And it is normal to feel pissed off that you are overloaded. It is normal to feel pissed off that you're fragmented and that you kind of can't get yourself back together or feel like you're whole again. Because there's too much going on for us. And so we need to slow down. And this is why there is such a movement now for people to either work fully remotely so they have more autonomy of their life and their day, to take, I don't know if you wouldn't say easier jobs, but jobs with less responsibility or just, and they're sacrificing. Maybe sometimes they are taking less pay. But I will challenge you, and this will be conversations for later on, is to not necessarily think that slowing down with your career or slowing down in your job is going to equal less pay. You can have a job that you enjoy and that is more balanced and be paid well. That's a really cool belief to start adopting. So I'm going to plant that seed. I'm going to leave that seed there for it to percolate. And we're going to dive into a little bit more about that. But for now, try and avoid the overload and try and avoid the fragmentation when you can, or at least be conscious of it. Take care, guys. Thank you for joining me today on Ditch the Struggle. You showing up here means so, so much to me. To dig deeper into the topics discussed today and to learn about my work, visit alanarosa.com. And don't forget to download your free resources while you're there. And if this episode resonated with you, please share with others who also want to ditch the struggle. Go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating and a review, and let me know what you'd like to see more of on this podcast. And before I go, I want to leave you with my 3 favorite ways to ditch the struggle. Be your own best advocate, take baby steps for the win, and forget about a linear career path. It's overrated and you are doing just fine. See you next time.